All right. Bula, sir, how are you?
Okay,
What's good?
Bola, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, sir. How have you been?
I'm good. Been a relaxing day, staying at home with the wife and the children, the grandchildren, and the great grandchildren.
And how is that? I mean, having children is a big thing in itself. Having
Mm.
grandchildren and then great grandchildren, that must be quite something.
Yeah, I think your perspective on life. In fact, I only have one great grandchild, great grandson. So I mean, that changes your perspective, put things into focus about what's important, and you get to understand why you're here and why it is that you do what that you do for your own family and for others that follow you. So, yeah, so it's been great. Have lots of blessings in my life.
And you just said that it changes your perspective on what's important. So, to you, what is currently important?
Well, currently I'm in this space where I've been given the opportunity to be participating in politics, having served as a minister for 10 years and now as a member of parliament for, I think now 3 years, or almost 3 years. So it just drives home the focus that whatever we need to do, whatever I need to do is to be able to contribute in the best possible way so that I can help bring about the best outcomes for the people that live today and those that follow us. And in particular for me, as I said, I've got a great grandson who's just 4 months old this past week. So it's important for us to keep that in perspective, that we are doing what we need to do, say the things that we need to do, fight for what we need to be able to do in the best interests of the people that are around us and the young and those that follow.
you know being in the government uh, and holding multiple portfolios in those number of years, and now being in the opposition, what do you think is the biggest difference?
Well, when you're a minister, you actually have an executive role, which means that one of your major roles is to execute the policies that government has in place and to carry out the things that Parliament agrees upon. And that was my full-time role for 10 years. You do participate in sorry, in parliamentary things, but that's your major role, executing the role of your ministry. And I had the opportunity to work Minister for Employment, Minister for Health, Minister for Land, for Infrastructure, and so forth. And your entire focus is on carrying out what you need to do in that ministry. So execution, operational type roles. Now, as a member of parliament, we have a bit more time, and you delve into much more details in the things about how laws are made. I'm very lucky, for instance, that I am part of the Standing Committee on Justice, Law and Human Rights. This is a committee that is always involved in making laws. Currently, right now, we're in the process of finalizing 6 different laws. Laws of the Code of Conduct for everybody that's in leadership in government, in the judiciary, in the executive, also in parliament, the access to information, and also the Accountability and Transparency Commission. And we have 3 other laws that we are working on: burial and cremations, on quarantine, and also the Institute for Learning and the Public Service. So creating laws, making sure that we make good laws that are good for the country, that address the needs of everybody in this country, that set the right path going forward. And that's been very exciting for me because it's not something that I did a lot when I was a minister. When you were a minister, you focus only on the laws of your particular ministry that you're in at a particular time. But here in Parliament, because the primary role of Parliament is to represent people, and the power of the people in a democracy is to build laws, to build policy, to pass budget. So now that we are in Parliament in opposition, we basically I sit in committees that do this thing. And last week, for instance, I've been sitting in that particular committee, the Committee of Justice and Law, and also being an alternate in another committee, the Committee on Social Affairs, which has also been looking at annual reports of things like town councils, Fiji National University, and so forth. So that gives us an opportunity to have an oversight function into how government funds are being used to be able to deliver the best possible outcomes for the people of this country. So it's been a really big change from being a minister, coming up with what is happens in that ministry and having a sort of a broader assessment of what needs to be done in the country, and an opportunity to dive very deeply into the laws that come up for review. So it has been a very, for me, I've enjoyed this period of being just an ordinary member of parliament, sitting in a committee, and also at the same time being the whip for the opposition that we have, the current opposition that we have in parliament, especially as you know, opposition has really dwindled in size. We started off with around 26 of us, and now I think there's only, 15 of us left. The others have sort of migrated across to join the government. So keeping up that important role of shining light on policies that come up, showing the alternative view of what needs to be done in terms of laws and policies, is a role that I've really enjoyed so far.
Your position in this new Committee of Justice and Law, right?
Yeah.
You've raised a point on uh, corporatism and lobbying, and that's something that we see in American politics, where large corporations they lobby for certain policies, right? How much of it do you think is currently happening in Fiji?
One of the good things that we have in our country is the way that we do the laws that we have for how you can fund political parties, sets a cap on the amount of money that a company can give to a political party.
That's ten thousand
Currently,
dollars,
under
right?
our laws, no company can pay, yeah, only for individuals, not companies. And I think that is a very good system for Fiji, because I was looking at the elections that you had in America, for instance. Elon Musk, I think he gave $270 million to back the campaign of Trump. And when you have a lot of people with that sort of power, with a body of the corporates coming in, obviously there is a great opportunity, a great chance that they could have an influence on government policy. So in terms of the way it's done now in Fiji, I think there's less of an opportunity of the corporates having an undue influence on how we debate things in Parliament, and we don't have that many lobbyists like they do in other countries. There's a lot of, to my I've been here for 3 years. I have not had anybody that come up and tries to lobby, other than the usual. When you talk to something that affects employees, you talk to employees in general, but you're not getting that particular thrust from a particular lobby group like you would have in other countries, like, for instance, the United States of America. And I believe that one of the important things that we need to maintain in Fiji is to continue to have this approach to set caps on how political parties can be funded, and to make sure that that funding can only come from individuals and not from corporate bodies. Because when you have corporate bodies, when people give a lot of money for something, they expect something in return. There's always that danger, and it's something that we need to keep close control on. I have not had that kind of influence, probably because nobody's actually funded my political campaign in terms of from corporate bodies. Friends have done it, and also things have come from my former political party, which is the FijiFirst, and which no longer exists now.
Mm, this is something that I've noticed with the current political landscape. It's very easy to play into uh, divisive politics, where you have where people see one side that is right and one side that is wrong. And you've mentioned something on your talk with Straight Talk on Fiji Village. You mentioned how
Mm.
the opposition and government, they are meant to work together to pass laws. It's not that the government is right and wrong, or the opposition is right and wrong. You guys work hand in hand to pass laws that matter. Why do you think people play into divisive politics these days?
Well, I think people come from different support from different groups of people, and to a large degree, they want to be able to say things that speak to the interests of a particular group. whether you talk about an ethnic group or geographical group and so forth. But at the end of the day, when you're talking about developing good policies and developing good laws, you need people that can have the freedom to say what they want to say, looking at things from different views. I've been a member of a cabinet. Sometimes you argue things in cabinet. Your point of view is then, is not accepted. And being a member of the cabinet, you have to go with what cabinet is because you're part of that team, part of that group. And if you don't want to do that, then you can pull out of government and so forth. But in terms of parliament, you have this very important role of members of the opposition being given having the ability to say things that maybe members of government would not be able to do because they are bound by the dictates of their party. One of the other advantages that we have now in opposition is because we don't belong to a party. We're all independent members of parliament, but we have coalesced around a leader, the current leader of the opposition, Honorable Ines Saratu, and everybody still has the right to say what it is that they personally want to say. But at the same time, while we are still independent members of parliament, we have the right to be able to say things that others might not want to say. And I think when you have that opportunity to freely share your ideas, it helps to build better policy. It helps, and also the oversight. You see, this past week, for instance, we have been having oversight on things like the Lambasa Town Council, the town councils. And I see, for instance, sometimes there's a big problem with financial audit for these councils. When you look at the report that was done by the Auditor General for the town council, you find that most of them, when the finances, there's a qualified opinion. Qualified opinion audit means the Auditor General was not happy with what he saw. The financial statements are late. It gives us an opportunity to be able to speak very candidly to the shortcomings of the bodies that get funded by government. And as members of parliament, as representatives of people, that's what we need to do. And as I said during that other interview, I think it was Vijay Narayan, that people need to see that when government and the opposition is there, we both have a very important role. Without the opposition, some of the things that we do say would never be said. And they would not be heard. We have an opportunity to sit in parliament and sit in other forums. All towards the purpose of building better policy, building better laws for the people of our country.
Speaking of representation, do you think it's necessary that uh, we can have local elections as well for town councils?
I think it is good to be able to do that. There's still a lot of work that they have to do in terms of going down that route, in terms of getting the wards. A lot of the town boundaries have increased over time, and the idea of democracy so that people can select their own leadership in terms of the town council is good. And I'm hoping that they can do that. I think it'll be exceedingly difficult given that they have not done all the legislative changes that they need to do in order to carry out the local government elections. I think it'll take some time. And I'm not too sure that they'll be able to do it by this year or by next year. But it is definitely a good idea. The idea of democracy, where people have a say in things that govern themselves, they can have a say in their own governance, is something good.
And what do you make of the current government? I mean, it's a broad question, I know, but if someone were to ask you point blank, Mr. Usamate, what do you make of the current government? Are they doing a good job, or are they being realistic in their approach? What do you have to say for that?
I think, well, all governments, they're coming to power on the basis of promises that they've made to people about what they will do when they come into power, and then it is their job to be able to deliver on what it is that they promise to do. One of the challenges that they have is that they have, they're a coalition of three different parties, each of which brought their own manifesto into that relationship. So obviously there's a lot of give and take between what they promised and what they're actually delivering, which is one of the challenges that they have. And the other one, of course, is It's very easy to make a lot of promises when you're outside of government. And you believe, when you look around and you see problems with what's happening in Fiji, you think that as soon as you can come into government, it's like having a magic wand and abracadabra, you can do things and things get better automatically. It is not like that. Everything in leadership is always a matter of balancing competing interests. Now that they've come into government, they're realizing that it's not that easy to be able to deliver all the things that they want. In this current government, there's a lot of strong Itoke nationalistic interest on one hand, and at the same time, there's some multicultural, more equity type of interest. And the problem of trying to merge and address all of these things is always a challenge for them. So I think that what government is finding, that it was not as easy as they were going around promising everybody prior to the elections. And that is the challenge that all governments will face. There's no such thing unless you come from a country like maybe United Arab Emirates or Qatar or something where they have so much money. In Fiji, there's, the amount of money that the government is able to get. It's always a matter of balancing out what you do for one group of people or one geographical location compared to the others. So it's always a balance. And I think what they're finding, a lot of it, they talked about, initially they talked about a lot of freedom. They talk about good governance, but a lot of the headlines that we're seeing today is not good. When we had all these issues with the Commission of Inquiry, all the thing that's happening there. Recently, this case with, Deputy Prime Minister Kamikamiza, where they're talking about the appointment of the FICAC commissioner. They're saying that it's illegal. So these issues of good governance, of appointing the right people, of due process, is very important. And I think that they're having a lot of problems trying to deliver on what it is they talked about prior to coming to government. And when they are actually in government, they're finding it very, very difficult to be able to deliver on those things.
There's an alternate view that that one of my friends he proposed, and he said, even though it's very hard to merge these governments together because obviously they have very differing views, right? On one hand, you have ethno-nationalists, and then on the other hand, you have a more sort of liberal, progressive party. And what he said was that in merging these parties together, it sort of proposes a balanced government where it's not too much. It's not favored too much on either side. What do you make of that argument?
At the end of the day, that's what you need to be able to do. And that's what I'm saying. There's always competing interests. When you have a big group of people, for instance, that were backing you and are very strong ethno-nationalists, they will expect things that deliver what they want. At the same time, if you have other people that are more middle of the road progressive, they also want the things that they want. So being able to balance that out and at the same time meet the needs of these competing groups is always going to be a challenge. So I think, for instance, in terms of the government that's in place now, they have built on some of the policies that we had in the past when we were in government, which is helping out the more vulnerable people. You had the national minimum wage has gone up, the subsidies for medicine, the subsidies for electricity, for water, the social pension, all of these things were there to help the people at the bottom. But at the same time, they need to be able to help different ethnic groups, different geographical groups, without making those that are not part of those groups feel that they have been left out. And I think that is a major challenge for this government to be able to deliver.
Like you said, it's easy to I guess you could relate to that more now. Sitting on the other side, it's, I guess, easier for people to say, why aren't you getting this done? Why aren't you getting this done? And if I'm in power, I can change it overnight. But then when you actually apply it to the real world, it's much more difficult than most people think.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, when we were in government, there was, I think, when we were in government, there was a more focus of treating everybody equally. There was an idea of meritocracy, getting the best people into the job so that they could deliver service. That was like sort of the major thing that we had when we were in government. Sometimes that was interpreted in some quarters as not doing enough for certain groups of people. So that's how it was seen. Now I think for the current government that's in place, they have a lot of, as you said, as I believe, a lot of ethno-nationalistic groups within the coalition, some very religious fundamentalistic ways of looking at things. So they have to be able to balance all that out in what they're doing. And on top of that, when you have a coalition, all the coalition partners expects that they will get some good things out of being part of the coalition. And then we've had a group of people that used to be part of our opposition. We now have 11 of them have joined government. 3 of them have become ministers. I don't know how many of them have become assistant ministers. Is it 4? Maybe 4 of them have become assistant ministers. That also has an impact on the dynamics that already exist within the coalition. Those that were already in the coalition, some who are not assistant ministers or not ministers. This creates all these dynamic types of things happening in that environment that also impacts them on what they decide to do policy-wise. So it affects the governance of everything that they do. And there's a lot of talk about what's happening now with Deputy Prime Minister Kamikamiza. I mean, that case is going forward. There were other cases also in FICAC. We don't know there was one case on Deputy Prime Minister Biman. I think there might be another one on Minister Tuisawau, if I read today's papers. But all of these things are happening within the confines of the government as it exists today. So it's a challenge that they have to grapple with.
I'll read a quote to you. This is something that you've said in parliamentary debate back in February of 2023. I congratulate the Honorable Prime Minister for his appointment as leader of government. And congratulations to the 3 deputy prime ministers, the ministers and the assistant ministers for their appointment, and to all other members on the government side. My apology, I forgot that there is no one else apart from the prime minister, the deputy prime minister, the ministers and assistant ministers. Was that a jab at how congested the government is?
Not congested. It was just saying I've never seen a government ever in Fiji where everybody in government was either a minister or assistant minister. So when they started off, that was it. Everybody was part of the executive. Now, when we were in government, I think at one time there was only 10 ministers. Only 10. The others were assistant ministers, others working as as members of committees and so forth. But you can't have. It's like having a tribe, and if you have 30 people in the tribe, 27 of them are chiefs, and there are only 3 people that you can tell what to do. Now, more bosses than the people to do the actual work. That's completely illogical. It doesn't make sense. So when I was saying that, I was having a jab, telling them there's too many people, too many bosses, not enough people to do the work. I think it's unheard of. If I remember correctly, when we were last in government, we had maybe 10, 11, 12 ministers, that's it. And with good ministers, with good permanent secretaries, with good systems and process, you can run government. So if you have too many people in the executive, either as ministers and assistant ministers, what is it that they're doing? Is there enough work, or do they start treading on the shoes of the people that are professional civil servants who are supposed to do the job? You start going into the work that they should be doing. No, normally a minister is like he sits at policy level, he sits at regulatory level, he just checks to make sure that things are moving in the right direction, that the civil servants are executing. Now, if there's not enough work for them, they'll start doing the work of the civil servants. And then you have different lines of people get confused about who has the authority. And I think that's what's happening in a lot of these ministries. And I have no doubt that is what's happening when you have so many ministers with smaller and smaller portfolios. It's virtually unheard of in this country. I think the last time we had it, when we had that government of national unity, I think, and was it Garcia or somebody? Garcia, where they had all these small ministers looking after very small, minute things. It is not enough to be able to warrant the position of when you have a minister, you need a permanent secretary, you need staff, you need vehicles, you need all kinds of things. There's added cost. And then if they spend a lot of time just gallivanting around the globe, what? In my time when we went, the prime minister went somewhere, maybe one minister will go with him, but not five, six, 10 ministers all going together. That's just a waste of money. You need to be able to put your people in the places where they can deliver best results and not just walk around in packs. I think it's totally inefficient the way that it's been happening.
Why do you think they did that? Why do you think they've appointed so many ministers?
Well, the comment that I've made is lollies for the boys, lollipops. You gotta keep everybody happy, give them something back. I think that's for me. That's basically what it is. And I think also for the members of the opposition that they've enticed across. 11 members of parliament that used to be part of the opposition, they had to give them something. So they've given them 3 ministerial portfolios. And if I'm not mistaken, probably four or five, I'm not too sure, assistant ministerial portfolios. And an assistant ministerial portfolio, the ministerial portfolio is the one that recognized. Assistant ministers, some of them probably have very little to do. So they're given all of these niceties, but I don't know what it is that they do, other than come to parliament and I don't know. I don't know what's in their job description.
The previous administration, the administration that you've served under, apart from the large number of support, you also had an equal amount of criticism and people who disagreed with the previous administration.
Mm.
Do you think there was any validity in what people criticized about the previous administration?
Oh yeah, yeah. Whenever there is smoke, means that something is burning. So I think there were things that were criticized for that were correct, and those things needed to be fixed. Sometimes also criticism comes because people don't fully understand why things are the way that they are. I give one example. People always feel that government has all the money that it needs to carry out all the development work that it needs to do, but that's not true. Money from government comes from what does come from? VAT, value added tax. That if you have a lot of consumption, you have a lot of value added tax. It also comes from the tax from people's pay. If a lot more people are employed, and if they're employed at higher wage levels than 30,000, then tax from salary is collected. So money comes from duties and all of these things. So as the economy grows, there's more money available to be able to distribute to the work that government needs to be able to do. When you go out into different areas in Fiji, people want their road fixed. People want their water fixed. People want the issues that relate directly to them always fixed. But government is always in a position where it has to balance things out, work to a longer term plan, and to be able to deliver services across the country, but it's not possible to be able to deliver everything at the same time. That is the case for all governments that have worked in Fiji, and it's also the current case for the government that happens today. So some of the complaints that I made during our time was obviously legitimate. There are things that could not be delivered at that particular point in time. A lot of other things too is when people say, a lot of people in Fiji, they hear something, they just say it. They just repeat and they comment about it without fully understanding why is it that things are the way that they are. So I think, to my mind, as I reflect back during the time that we were in government, we did a lot of investment in infrastructure, which is, it's heavy lifting, heavy lifting of roads and jetties and so forth. And the impact of these things will be felt over generations and years to come. We had a lot of emphasis on education, free education, the bus fares, and all of these things have a massive impact on the people that are coming through the system. So these things help people across the board, but there will always be. It is never possible to deliver on everybody's wish list. And every government that comes in, ours, this government, has to decide where it will put money into year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4. 4 years in which you'll be able to run a government. And you can't deliver everybody's aspirations all the time, every time.
There were quite a few criticisms on issues like freedom and freedom of speech. being in that administration, do you think there was an issue with freedom? Do you think that, and this is me quoting, certain, at that time they were opposition, they used to um, use the term draconian, that the government was draconian and, too overpowering.
Yeah.
Do you think there's any truth to that?
I think that was the spin that was put on it. I mean, even now, in terms of freedom, people will always be maybe a bit wary of government and what they can do and what they cannot do in terms of getting back at you. And I don't think the people that are opponents of this government, they probably feel the same as those that felt that, as those who were saying those kinds of things when we were in government. Those who are opponents of government. I've been in cases when you were in government where we had Talanoa sessions. The former prime minister used to love to have Talanoa sessions, and people would, to our face, tell us the things that were wrong. So I know there was a lot of talk about what is that? What's that media industry, MIDA? MIDA thing that was repealed about the press. Those issues have been there. At the moment, also we have the press also saying, members of the press sometimes saying things that are not true, but nobody holds them to task. So it depends. I think there's no government that will be completely free, where you will have complete freedom. Freedom is always something that has to be exercised. It will come up to a particular level. Things will have to be balanced out. So maybe there were some things during our time that we were not as free, but also during this time, we can't say that everything is free now. It's graduated thing. There's a degrees of even now, people also feel that they're under some constraints. So I mean, freedom is not 100% no freedom at that time and 100% freedom now. I think it's balanced, and some of those constraints still exist today.
You've hinted at forming a new party called PeopleFirst Party. Is that something that you would like to take forward into the upcoming elections?
Yeah, we are actually working on that. I think from the remaining members of parliament that are in the opposition, there's 10 of us who have been working very hard at putting together the requirements. In order to get a new party, you need to get 5,000 people signing off, 2,000 from the central division, 1,700 and I think it's 25 from the western, 1,000 from the north, and 250 from the north. So we've been doing all that work, beginning to do the groundwork, putting together a constitution. There's a lot of work that goes into it. And one of the difficulties that we have, currently, all the parties that are in parliament, out of once this government came in, they gave each of these parties around $325,000 every year to help them do in their party work. We, because we are not a party, we don't get that money. So we need to be able to source the funding that we need ourselves for establishing the party. You need to set up offices. You need to, constitution and all of these things. So that is something that we are working on, and we are hoping that in the not too distant future, we will be in a position to apply with all the conditions. And once the party is registered, we will then move into the other things that we can do to get ready for the future elections.
Do you think having a cap on the amount of donations could be a hindrance in you being able to set up a new party?
I personally, we haven't talked about this as a group that's setting up a party, but I personally like the idea of caps. I like the idea of caps because you don't want to be in a situation where people who have a lot of money, because the fact that they put a lot of money into a particular political party, then have some say over the policies of that party. As much as possible, the policies of a party should be dependent upon the manifesto and what they put into their values and their objectives, and not to be unduly influenced by the money that rich people with a lot of money pour into a political party. I like the idea of caps. I think it keeps things valid. Look at some of these other countries where large lobbyists have poured lots of money into politicians. At the end of the day, when you see that the policies that they put in place, it benefits those that have put the money into those political parties. And I think Fiji is such a small country, we don't want to ever see that. I like what we have now. I think maybe we might, I know, there might be some room for reconsidering the ceiling. The current ceiling is $10,000 per person. That was put in place in 2014. We'll see. I mean, in our Justice and Law Human Rights Committee, we were looking at the report for the 2022 joint report on the elections for 2022. There's a report that came out of the MOG, or the Multi Observer Group, and also recommendations that have come from the Supervisor of Elections Office and the Electoral Commission. And government has also put together a Fiji Law Reform Commission, I think, that's been looking at electoral law. So they will be coming up with some suggestions on what needs to be done to review our electoral system. But I think that is one principle we should keep. We should limit it so that nobody with a lot of money can influence the way a political party moves or what it proposes in government, to keep it as objective as possible. That's a principle I like.
And your manifesto, the principles of the People First Party, will it be a blueprint of the Fiji First Party, the previous administration that you served under, or will it have a few changes? What does the manifesto look like?
I'm not going to talk about it, but I think it is different. A lot of things. I mean, we have served under Fiji First. We saw the benefits that came out of that system, the good things that they did. We did under that umbrella. We also saw the weaknesses, and when we're developing something new, we try to make sure that we keep what worked, and at the same time, we remedy the things that need to be improved. So even in our manifesto as it comes, and I mean, the Constitution, not even talking about a manifesto yet. The Constitution, I think it's better for me not to talk about the details, because it's been a long, it's been a long discussion. We haven't just taken everything from Fiji First and put it into here. There's been a lot of discussion about what was good in the old system, what needs to be improved, what needs to be changed slightly, and what needs to be fully changed. So all of that is going into our constitution. So at the moment, it's just a constitution of the party that the group has been working on. And then once we get close to elections, then we will need to finalize what the manifesto will be.
And then I guess you also have to suit the time as well. Currently, we can see the rise of artificial intelligence, and you know, people, and rightfully so, they have a concern with whether or not their jobs are at risk, because a lot of things are being can be automated through artificial intelligence. Some companies have started using AI in place of their accountants and administrators, and customer service is being automated by AI. Is there any provision for artificial intelligence in the upcoming elections from your side?
We haven't, as I said, we haven't really gone down into the details of that. For our particular party, what we've been working on is a constitution. But in terms of particular areas like, AI, or, all of these big problems, AI is a big problem. I've been listening to BBC and watching about the discussions that have been taking place. We need to be able to treat it as a tool, but not allow it to engulf us, not allow it to control the way we do things. And I'm also worried about if human beings get too reliant on these things, they lose their capacity to think. They lose the capacity to use their brains and to their brain cells and to develop. And what they say: if you don't use it, you lose it. If you don't use your brain, if you don't exercise your body, you're gonna lose it. So there needs to be a fine balance between these things. So AI is very useful. I to a large degree have tried to avoid it. My children tell me, hey, you gotta use more of it, because it summarizes things for you rather than having to search for this and that. It summarizes it for you, but it summarizes from the point of view of somebody that put that, well, I don't know what is the software into that machine, so that you look at things in a particular way. And I think that is the dangerous part. Who is it that decides what you read about a particular topic or how you interpret a particular topic? So I still have that bit of reluctance. I think it has to be seen as a tool, We need to control it so that it does not have an undue influence. Now you have all of these deep fakes. Some have been circulating in Fiji. And now again, all this cyber security stuff, the online attacks, whenever there's an election somewhere, you find people trying to influence elections through these ways. And all these attacks that we have on social, I was reading about the things that they have in Australia. I think that even in Australia, are they limiting social media or Facebook to 16-year-olds and above, or things like that? If those things come in,
Social media
we need
ban.
to be able to use it, but yeah, social media ban is AI and all of these things. We need to see them as tools, but not allow us to be led or directed by what comes from artificial intelligence or from social media.
You've been quite vocal on merit-based and meritocracy, a form of governance, and on the other hand, you also have and legitimate concerns from especially the native population that their representation as well. Do you think the GCC is and sorry for bringing in such a heavy topic, but do you think the GCC is a perfect representation of the native population and their interests, or do you think there's an alternate way?
I think the government has put in has revived the Great Council of Chiefs, so it has its role to play. And I think for the GCC to be able to function well, it must take into account the interests of all Itoke, not only some. Some people tend to see the GC as elitist, is that it only looks after a certain segment of the population, of the Itoke population. My own belief is that it has a role to play, but it must stay in that role. And it must make sure that when it talks about Itoke and the things that matter to them, it treats all Itoke equally. Not only those of higher standing, the rich, the poor from all parts of Fiji. It must be able to address all their needs, and it must also not be a second government. The government of Fiji is a democratically elected government. I think there's a role for the GCC to be able to what it's doing now. I think the chairman of the GCC right now and what they have done, looking at things across the social economic development of it. Okay, proposing things that they think might help them. Keeping it at that level is good, but it must address everybody. It must not be focused on one particular strata or one particular segment of Itoke as opposed to others. I think the young Itoke, those that have not been brought up in villages, those that are not in tune with the culture, they must also feel that they also have a place to play in the setup and the mechanisms that are established by the GCC. Because they always have the other side, especially for young Itoke, urban Itoke, is that they can become heavily involved in the politics of the day. And recently we had a very youth parliament. I don't know, was it this year or last year? Youth parliament, and I think I actually spoke at that youth parliament. And I was very glad to see the kinds of things that they came up with. So there's avenues for them, for Itoke, the younger Itoke. They can work together with the GCC, but they also have parliament here, which represents everybody, and their interests can come up through those particular forums. And now in our Itoke setting, we have our village meetings where the Turani Koro is in control. And we also have our Mbose Vanua. In the Mbose Vanua, it is the chiefs who are in control. So all of these things need to be blended together. Because whether you're a chief, whether you're a commoner, whether you're living in a town, whether you're living in a village, all Itoke are Itoke. And they must have a feeling that whatever body is there supposed to represent their interest actually does that. And it is not partial only to one part of the society.
There's this book called The Facade of Democracy by Asesela Ravuvu, and it's quite a controversial book, and I was reading through it, but it does have some interesting points. And like you said, all the interests of all Ithauke should be viewed equally across the board, across every end of Fiji. And Dr. Ravuvu made made the point that during colonial times, the coastal tribes were seen as superior to those of the interior, and the people of Dolo were seen as inferior, and they were undermined. And then you had terms like Kaidolo, where you'd like make fun of them. Um, and Arthur Gordon had this beautiful quote, and he said, "How can those be rebels who have never submitted? How can you call those people rebels when they have never submitted to the laws?" And anyways, I went off on a tangent, but it's, I guess, important for people to see that it's not as simple as just addressing the interests of the native population, because you have different tribes as well, they live in different areas and they have different needs as well. If you were to get into power post 2026, would you still have the GCC around, or what plans do you have for the GCC?
As I said, I think in our group when when we're discussing our constitution, GCC or no GCC is something that will apparently become in a manifesto when we get to that stage. But in the constitution, we're looking at everybody equally, and we recognize also the place of the Itokes, the indigenous people, and their institutions, their culture, and so forth. So we recognize that particular place. We have not made a statement to any degree on what we would say about the GCC, but we also believe that there needs to be assistance for them, just as there needs to be assistance for the less well off in all other societies. I mean, the poor are the poor, immaterial of what their ethnic background, immaterial of their what religion that they come from, immaterial of where they are. They are the poor, they need to be helped. And if they are facing obstacles across the board, they all need to be addressed. When you talk about history and you talk about Ito case and other people, it's important to remember that politics is not a new thing. It's an old thing. And in politics, the people that have the power, they always try to conserve the power. Whether you're talking about obviously when the colonial masters came in, there was a certain pockets of political power in Fiji, in the different parts, I mean, in the Itoke setup. And obviously those that had that power, they would try to preserve it. That would be the same from any other country. When you go to China or any other country, it's always like that. Those in power try to preserve their power. And when they write the history of their time, the history will always point towards them. That's just the nature of the world. There's nothing new about it. So when we see about what happened during those colonial times, the Zolo Wars and all the things that happened, the Viti Company. I mean, I read Robert Nichols, was it, his thesis about the Zolo Wars. That was also very interesting. And when you read this thing, you realize that politics is not something new. It's always been there. And when you are in power, you try to preserve your power. So obviously, if at that time when the colonial powers came in and the people on the coast had a lot of political power, they will write history in a way to point to them and minimize how people view others. That is normal in any society. What we right now need to be able to see is to fully understand that particular history and realize that at the end of the day, we are all Fijians, and for all of us, it's okay whether you're from the Zolo, whether you're from the islands, no matter what people say about your history, we in fact are all equal. And that's the important essence. I mean, this is why, under the former administration, we always talked about meritocracy. So when we read all of these stories about different levels of people, the Zolo, the island, whoever, we need to peel out the layers and see the essence of what it is that is written, because all history is written from somebody's perspective. There's no such thing as an objective history. History is always from the viewpoint of the person writing. Whether you're talking about the coming in of Christianity into Fiji, or how the different races work together, the way that it is written will always be from the perspective of the person writing that particular history. So we need to be able to look at history from the different perspectives, not just the perspective of the chiefs at that time, not just the perspective of those that were on the coast, not just the perspective from those that were the Zolo tribes. See history completely as a reflection of everybody's perspective. And that is one of the great challenges that we have. A lot of our people don't know a lot about history in Fiji, the real history of what happened in this country. I mean, this past week I was looking at well, there was a photo by this guy who always posts about the Melanesian workers who were digging the roads in Suva. And I did a post. I said, "Do you know one of the big stories that happens in Fiji? The people say that Fijian people came directly from a boat to Africa to Fiji." And I said, this is all hogwash. It's not true. Because when you look at the genetic markers for the people that came to the Pacific, the early settlers were the Lapita people. And according to the genetic markers, they came down from Taiwan, Philippines, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, Solomon, Vanuatu into Fiji. And when you look at the language, it also shows that people actually came down from these roots. But you see all of these things. Somebody then builds a story. I think it was during the time of Lorimer Fission, who was one of the instructors at the Methodist College at that time. He just made a suggestion that people might have, when he looked at what was the Itoke people, he thought they were very similar to the people from Tanganyika in Africa. And because of the way that he wrote it, people then started writing and making up this big story about Itoke coming directly from Africa. And that's what happens. Also, when you are in a political power in a country, whether in an Itoke setting or other setting, when you write about history, you write history to point to your lineage. That is always true. It happened for the white people when they were running civilization. They treated everybody as beneath them. Same thing too in all of our cultures. We talk about Indian, Chinese, any culture. The people in power who write the history books, they make the history point to them. And for us that live today, we need to be able to look at that history appropriately and try to understand the real things that happen. For instance, Apollo Siranawai, Apollo Sinawai, and Viti Company. All of these companies, when they're written the history books, they're like rebels. But what were they doing? They were trying to upgrade the socio-economic status of Itokes at that time. But the colonial powers looked at it in a different way. That is the story of politics. When you are in power, you always try to minimize those that are in opposition to you and uplift yourself. That's just history. That's just politics. That's just power.
Are you a man of faith, Mr. Usamate?
Yeah. I'm a Methodist. I'm a Christian. I belong to. I go to church in the place where I live here in Nakasi, but I'm still going to the church from the settlement that I was brought up in. I'm a lay preacher, and I'm also involved with the Colombo Methodist Circuit Trust. I am a member of the trust for the circuit, and I do a lot of work in the church.
And how much of your faith would you
But
say
I
has?
want to
Yeah,
tell you also
yeah.
this politics that I'm talking about also exists in all religions. All religions it occurs. But those that are in power will try to write the story of their religion, of their religious group, so that it points to them. It uplifts those in power and diminishes those that are not in power. Politics and power is everywhere.
And speaking of power, you also have the issue of centralization of power, and that happens when a certain leader is in power for a very long time. And I think that's one of the criticisms that former Prime Minister Beni Marama faced. And there have been suggestions on putting a term limit on prime ministers. Uh, it's a nuanced thing, but usually applies to presidents and if there's a two-party system, right? Especially like the United States.
Mm.
Do you think there needs to be a cap on the time, how many times a prime minister can get into power?
Personally, I think it's a good idea, and I think that is probably why they have those requirements in the American system. It's important to realize also that the American system constitutionally does not say that they should be limited to two parties. They can obviously have other parties, and they've had other parties in the past. But the idea of limiting leadership, personally, I like it. But I think once you become too long, you can feel that you have a sense of right to whatever it is that you're leading. And I personally don't like that idea. I think there should be an opportunity also. Good leadership, good leaders develop leaders. So if you're a great leader, one of the ways in which you recognize good leaders is that they develop leaders to take over from them. And if you have a leader that's just leading as if he's non-expendable, that's a sign of bad leadership. Good leaders develop good results, but the ultimate level of good leadership is developing other leaders who can take it to the next level. So I agree with that principle generally. Personally, yeah.
And what number would you place on that?
Well, for instance, I know in the States it's two terms. Eh? I think in the Methodist Church in Fiji, which is very democratic, I must say. The Methodist Church in Fiji, I always tell people our church is very, very democratic. Now we have our cell groups, where they elect things and they come up to the monthly meetings in the church, then the circuit meetings, then the divisional meeting, and it goes up to the meeting of the conference of the Methodist Church. It's very democratic the way it does. So even in the Methodist Church, I think it limits it to two terms. I think the president can only be there for 2 terms. So I like the overall principle of limiting the terms. I'm not too sure whether it should be 2 or 3. That number I haven't really thought about it. But the principle of limiting the number of times the leader can be the leader is something that I agree to.
Do you think the church should be involved in politics?
The church is involved in politics. Everybody is involved in politics. I mean,
But the church
politics is the power.
as
So,
an entity.
well, the problem with the church is an entity because the people that are in the church they have all different political leanings. I'm a member of the Methodist Church, but a lot of the Prime Minister is also a member of the Methodist Church. He has his own grouping. There are other people in other parties who are also members of the Methodist Church. So I think in that way, I don't agree with the fact that with the idea that the church itself should be actively involved, but to realize at the end of the day, if you're looking at the welfare of people in a community, you will be involved because you will be pushing for certain things. You'll be pushing, for instance, for social welfare or for looking after people that need assistance. Any religious body will be doing all of those things. And at the same time, also, you'll also be looking to preserve the right for people to worship. So in that sense, churches are involved. But all of us, we're sitting in all of these different parties. We might belong to the same religious group, but we are in different political parties.
What do you have to make for that argument that Fiji should be recognized as a Christian state? Do you do you think
No,
it's a good idea?
I believe that the idea of being a Christian state, my own belief, it is not something that will be sanctioned by laws by human beings. Being a Christian is something that is a spiritual manifestation of your belief. And you don't need to be able to tell by a piece of law that you are a Christian or not a Christian. It is something that is manifest in you. When you become a Christian, you give your life to Christ, become born again, and that is the hallmark of Christianity. It is not just about words or following rules because you're compelled to do so. So my own thinking is that we've never had a Christian state before in this country. It's always been secular, but people have always had the right to worship the God that they choose to worship in the way that they want. And I think if you try to become a state where you try to compel people worship in a particular way, worship a particular God, and it's not coming from inside of them, then that's a false religion. Real religion is something that comes from the convictions of one's soul, and they believe in it, and it becomes manifest in their beliefs in what they do on a daily basis.
This is my personal belief that if you give the state the power to recognize the state itself and the people in it uh, into a certain religion, let's say a Christian state, what you then do is from the perspective of a Christian, because I'm Christian, in the perspective of a Christian, it's I don't want to give the government and the state the power to control my religion and to force other people to follow my religion, because it's not what it's about. It's about offering um, the message of salvation, and if someone wants to accept, nice. If someone doesn't want to accept, then too bad. But the state shouldn't have the power to enforce that. And it's been something of debate, a hot topic. Why do you think it's a hot topic in this country?
I think because a lot of people try to use that card to get support for themselves. And I think it is being a Christian, it is to my mind, it's a false notion of what being a Christian is. For me, being a Christian or being religious is something that becomes born again, and you have the Holy Spirit living in you, where you don't need laws to compel you to do or not to do something. It's something that comes from a compulsion from Christ Himself and the Holy Spirit living in you. You don't need laws to be able to do that. You know, in the past centuries, at one time, Christians were persecuted by the state. Then it became a state religion. When it became a state religion, it didn't make that particular version of Christianity perfect. There were also imperfections in it. And you can see that about what happened when it was a state religion all around the country. And that happens in every society. Whether you're talking about some countries where Islam is a state religion, having that state religion as the religion of the country does not make that version of Islam or Christianity perfect. There are also imperfections in it. At the heart of religion is a person's personal conviction and connection to God. That must be the basis upon which one becomes religious in any sense, to be able to abide with the teaching of their God.
It's yeah, I guess that's a topic that we can talk about all day, because religion, especially religion, people are more divided, I believe, on religion than politics. And
Yeah, and
certain
it's
political,
very
yeah.
bad now. It's very bad now. I mean, I remember normally when you come around to 2014 election, 2018, 2022, then you get all of these things on social media, the strong ethno-nationalistic, another sort of Christian nationalism, all that becomes very strong. But now it seems to be there all the time. I don't know, maybe my perception is wrong. It's there all the time, and there's all kinds of negative hate messages left, right, and center. I mean, I get sworn at every day. I'll post something about something, and people attack me for saying I'm anti-Christian or something. But it's just there. I tell my children not to read the not to read the comments when people swear at me in social media and accuse me of not being a Christian while swearing at me. That's the most interesting thing. So
How
I don't know
much? Yeah.
this. Yeah, it's very bad. I think social media, the way people just attack each other left, right, and center on the basis of racial type things. I mean, I get attacked all the time, like being a fake it okay or something, or fake Christian because of what I talk about, what I say. Yeah, uh, I don't know.
How much of your faith plays into how you deal with politics?
My biggest challenge in politics is to be able to live my faith. One of the things that one of my things for my faith is to love everybody. It says to love your enemy, to not to judge. That's a very difficult thing for politicians because we get attacked and we like to have a go, and we get judged and we like to judge. So that aspect of the faith is always a difficult thing to be able to try to live. And when I'm not be able to live up to those principles and those values, then it reminds me to look at myself in the mirror and to see the weaknesses that I have. But the good thing is that there's no perfect person in this world. And for Christians, we believe that we are not saved by what we do, but our belief in Christ, and that it is righteousness that cleanses me, not what I'm able to do. So that, to some extent, gives us a bit of leeway, gives me a bit of relief but at the same time, it challenges me to be able to live my faith to the best of my ability. And I'm saying I'm not 100% good Christian. Still, always a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, I mean, if we are constantly compared to the most perfect man that ever existed, then I guess none of us are.
Mm. Not possible. Mm.
Just the week before last, I had a conversation with one of my friends, Alfred Tora, and he's a big proponent of the concept of veitalanoa, where you sit down and you talk with the other person. Western style of methodology of extracting information is just coming and asking interview questions and then taking the information and going back, and you don't really connect with the person that you're asking questions with, right? Do you think the
Mm.
do you think a concept like veitalanoa can be useful in discussing things with the government? Let's say if you had the opportunity to sit down with the prime minister outside of the parliament setting, and sit down with the current government, and have a Talanoa session and discuss things that really matter. Do you think that is something that's possible, and would you be up for that?
That in fact happens. It happens all the time in Parliament. When we have a go at each other in Parliament, but outside the precincts of the formal parliamentary chambers, a lot of interchange happens during tea time, during other times when we need to meet, we talk and we discuss issues. So that Talanoa session does take place. So I think sometimes the members of the public say, I can be very vocal in Parliament. On the spur of the moment, I can say things, but none of the people that I have strong discussions with, those strong discussions in Parliament never prevent me from approaching them and talking things one-on-one, tea time, other places. So those sorts of talanos happen even for us that are currently in Parliament. We are pretty vocal about it. And I think the idea of having more talano opportunities for talano would be great because it's an opportunity for us to be able to listen and to understand each other. The important thing for Talanoa is that you must be prepared to back up what you're saying, and at the same time, very important, be prepared to listen. Not just to hear, but to listen. To listen means to hear what the other person is saying and try to understand where they're coming from. And when you have this talking and listening, your own ideas also evolve. Your ideas of your perception will evolve by participating in the Talanoa with somebody where both parties are talking and both parties are listening. If one party is not listening, then it's not going to involve. Because nobody is perfect. That means no one's ideas are perfect. And the opportunity to have the Talanoa whether you share your ideas should grow the ideas that you have to improve it. You know what they say about knowledge, eh? All resources in this world, whether talking about money or physical resources or labor, the more you use them, you deplete them, except knowledge. Knowledge, the more that you use it, the more it grows. So Talanoa is a way of growing knowledge. But to grow knowledge, there must be giving and receiving. If you just give and don't receive, that knowledge is not going to grow. So I believe that there's good opportunity. We do it to some degree within Parliament with the ministers and those on the government side. But of course, if we can grow that further, it'll be great for our country.
This reminded me of a story, and let's say your home, right? That's the home that you grew up in. That's the home that your parents, your grandparents grew up in. That's where you formed relationships, broke relationships, reconciled with people. Um, and let's say that home gets flooded once a week, right? Every week there's heavy rain, and then the house gets flooded. Would your first instinct be to relocate, go to another piece of land and build a home there, or would you try to set measures so that your house doesn't get flooded again? And most people would choose, you know, to choose the latter. And I guess that's a reality that the people of Serua are currently facing. They have rising sea levels, and even though they know that in one way or another, it's inevitable that the sea levels are rising, and it's very difficult to stop it. they still won't move because for them it's their home. That's where they grew up in. For me, someone like me in a metropolitan area, it's easy for me to just look at them and say, it's common sense, just move out. But in their perspective, it's very hard to do that. And you mentioned quite a bit about representation, that all Itaukes should be their interests should be viewed on an equal scale. When you do get into power, how do you think you will help people like the people of Serua?
Yeah, that's a tough one because I tell you, I was brought up in a settlement, and your belief about what is important is sort of socialized into you from the time that you are born. Like for instance, if you're in a village, this is where our ancestors are buried, and that value becomes very important for you. It's a matter of values. If that is your ultimate value, then it's going to be very difficult for you to leave that place. For now, I'm living here in Nakasi. I bought this piece of land. So I don't have that sentimental attachment to this particular piece of land. It's a freehold plot that I have here. So it'll be far more easier for me when I bought this piece of land. My values about this piece of land are much more objective. It does not have that overly sentimental value. So it's my values here are more, I don't know what you will call it, not that attachment. So I think to some degree we have to be able to realize that that will be there for this. When we had when I was the last period that I was a minister, we had this issue of Nambabatu. You know Nambabatu, eh? You know Nambabatu in Volole, where they had those earthquakes and we had to move people out. A lot of people found it very difficult to move because they had that sentimental attachment to that place where their ancestors had been for a long time. So in my own case, when I go to places where my stepfather is from Rovalu in Kandavo. Rovalu in Kandavo is, and our house there is being eaten by the water. The waves are coming up. And what we tell them there, I tell them, look, you're the older generation, you're not going to move. But for the younger ones coming up, the best way to do it, for them to start moving their houses inland. So there's a sort of trying to do two things at the same time, realizing that the sea levels are going to rise. So new homes, we need to move inland and up. But the older homes, because they've been there for so long, we just try to save them for as long as we can. So there's a way of that we are trying to balance both of these values. The value of realizing that the sea level will rise by 1 meter over the next 80 to 100 years and you can't stop it. That's going to happen because of climate change. And at the same time, because of that, you try to move your new homes to places where it will be safe, but people still find it very difficult to leave the old buildings that are by the sea. And I mean, I go to Kandavu, to the village, maybe 3, 4 times a year, and I still like sleeping in those homes right beside the sea. It gives you that sense of, I don't know, the sentimentality, the values of living there. So I think the challenge for us is to be able to straddle that divide between the sentimentality of the whole homes and at the same time be prepared for what's coming up. And you see this across different countries. I think Yandua village in Bua, new houses are moving up the hill. I was in my biological father's village in Nevaka. A lot of the houses are moving up the hill, but on the seashore, houses are being carried away. And I've seen the places like Narikoso, new houses, they're moving to the hills. So in a lot of these places, there is that realization that we've got to move. But at the same time, you can't stop the sentimental value attached to the old buildings that are becoming inundated by the water. So it's straddling both of these values. You know that the people from Kiribati, I think they bought land from the Anglican Church in Vanua, in Wailevu. So some of them have begun to do that, but the big challenge is for the people in Tuvalu. Tuvalu is a country of 10,000 people. Tuvalu people on Kiowa Island. Kiowa Island, they've bought that island of Kiowa, but from their homeland of Tuvalu, That is a country that is really under threat. And there's a lot of talk internationally now. Internationally, we normally talk about recognizing refugees who become refugees because of war or because of something economic catastrophe. There's now talk internationally also of recognizing these people that are coming from places like Tuvalu, places like Kiribati, where the sea level is rising, to also give them the same status that we afford to refugees coming from wars or from economic catastrophe, and
Green
also
refugees.
recognize them as economic, yeah, as climate refugees. So I think that is something that's happening globally. And for those countries, like for the Banaba people, they have bought the island of Rabi in Fiji. So some of those people they straddle between living in Fiji and living also in Kiribati. I think the people on Kiowa Island from Tuvalu, I think they came from an island called Vaitupu. So they're basically here, but the big challenge is back where they come from. So I think globally, internationally, the world has to realize that all of this climate change is due to the work of things that were done in the countries that are big emitters. But these small island nations are the ones that are facing the brunt of what people have been doing in the richer countries over many, many years.
And what do you make of the integration of these refugees? Do you think it's good long term for Fijian society as a whole? What do you make of it?
Fiji has always been, over thousands of years, look at thousands of years, Fiji and I think every country in the world has always been a mixture of different groups of people. In Fiji, the earliest people that came to Fiji were the so-called Lapita people. They were said to have come down from Taiwan, come past Papua New Guinea, Solomons, Vanuatu, across to Fiji, Lapita people. But you know that Papua New Guinea has been settled by people for around 40,000 years. And Australia, the Aborigines, 60,000 years. So these people came later. Fiji said was occupied 3,500 years ago. But ever since then, even though we call ourselves Itauke, we're actually the mix of different groups of people that came here and settled. You have the darker skinned Melanesian type people, the Polynesians, they all came through. So in terms of Fiji, has always been a place where different people have mixed. This is my belief. We have this legend that says we came from straight from Africa. I think that was just a load of hogwash. If you look at people in Fiji, we're halfway. If you look at somebody from Samoa and somebody from Papua New Guinea, we Fijians like halfway between them. On one side of Fiji, from the eastern side, they look more like the Tongans and the Samoans. On the other side, they look like more Vanuatu. So we are a place, we've always been a melting pot. And I think Fiji has benefited from being a melting pot of different types of people. During the colonial era, we had the black-birded, the Melanesians come back. No, they were brought in here to labor. Later on, we had the Girimit period. We had the Chinese. From this cross-fertilization, I believe Fiji has become a much stronger country than it would have been if we did not have that cross-fertilization. So that's an idea. If you go to the United States of America, the same thing. It's the immigration, the merging and the cross-fertilization that made it a strong country. And I think that Fiji becomes better when different groups of people merge and cross-fertilize, as long as then they can recognize the importance of each other and what they all bring to the mix. Everybody brings something good to the mix. It's when you have this cross-fertilization and we treat the other as an enemy, that's when you have the problem. And that's what you're seeing in the United States with all of these anti-immigrant type of activities taking there, even though all those people that are sort of anti-immigrant are themselves the descendants of immigrants.
Yeah, yeah. I guess in one way or another, we are all immigrants. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
do you think that like much recently, the Fijian people might have noticed that there is an influx of foreign workers, especially Bangladeshi workers, right? Uh, and then therein lies also the issue of their safety and their rights as well. You constantly have
Yeah, absolutely.
employers abusing their rights. If you were to be in power, how would you deal with that?
There's we need to be able to provide the labor that our industries need. And I look at a lot of the construction sites around Fiji. They have Bangladeshi workers. And I asked some of these companies, why do you have them? They said, well, they always come to work on Mondays. A lot of our local workers, Monday, a lot of people don't come. Or if they get paid on Thursday, Friday, they don't come. So we need the workforce to be here. And already under our labor laws, all of our workers should be protected, whether they are locals. And when we send our workers overseas, they are also bound by the labor laws in Australia, New Zealand, and all of those countries. And labor is a fluid thing. There's shortage of labor in all kinds of things all over the world, even bus drivers, heavy lorry drivers, shortage in New Zealand. That's why all these people are going. And I think you can't stop it. If the industries need the sad thing about Fiji, I don't know with the youth unemployment. When I was a minister for labor, I think it was running at around 18%. But there is still youth unemployment. But at the same time, we are importing workers. And I think that gives us a lot of. I was reading the piece by, was it Fantasia Lockington from the hospitality sector? She did one piece this week or Saturday. It was a very interesting piece about the fact that we have unemployed people, and at the same time, companies are more willing to import workers, even though it's more expensive, obviously, because they feel that it is a better deal for them. So really, for us we really need to look at the implication for that. Are we training people in the right way? Why is it that companies are more willing to spend more money to bring workers from outside? No company would do that if they're able to hire locally, because it's obviously much more expensive for them. So these are important policy issues that I've been thinking about these past few months that we need to delve into a bit more as we look at policies for government as to how to address that. I think foreign workers that are here have to be protected because these people are paying taxes and contributing to our economy. And they're value adding the work that is done here. They're contributing to productivity. They need to be recognized and they need to be protected because they're doing something very useful for our country. So we need to be able to look also, why is it that we need workers from elsewhere? I mean, we're talking about cane cutters. There's no cane cutters now. I hear there is cane gang. So there was some talk at one time of bringing cane cutters from Vanuatu or other places. But these are big issues that we need to grapple with because labor now it's very fluid. People from here move to New Zealand. People in New Zealand move to Australia. Australia they move to America to UK. So it's a fluid market. We need to be able to work within that market and understand the reasons why people are moving into and out of countries.
Why do you think there's an issue with local work ethic?
That's a very interesting one.
Is it a
I
cultural
was brought
thing?
up
Is
in
it a
I was brought up in a settlement called Wakansla de Kalambu, and as part of our church activities, when they built the Langir market, the new Langir market, we got around 25 youths who were unemployed and got them to go and find a job for them there. Within 1 to 2 weeks, all except 5 had run away. They stopped working because they were not used to the discipline of working. They are more used to walking around and asking people for loose change, money to buy cigarettes and so forth. So I don't know. Has it become a civic cultural thing that we need to address somewhat? Yeah, it's a good question. I've been pondering also myself. Why is it like this? I said that we are teaching people in schools the ABCs, but not the attitudes of perseverance and hard work and dealing with difficulties. Maybe that's not for no our old people. They went through that tough. I mean, when I was a child, one of the first jobs that I had was working for one of the bottle collectors. You know the bottle. We work 50 cents a day, and people around in my area, the settlement, they would go and sell newspapers. We would collect coconuts and sell them. But I think the young today, maybe they are brought up in an environment where they just expect things to be done for them. Sometimes, again, then in government, we give too many things for free. Maybe people are getting this, I don't know, this attitude of just relaxing and not working hard. I don't know. Maybe that, who knows?
I guess that on the other side, you also have people that are struggling to get a job, get employment, and because of the shortcomings of a select few and their bad work ethic, you have the importation of, and this is just me presenting an argument, by the way, it's not something that I fully agree with or not, but the importation of foreign workers is a hindrance to the employment of the people that actually want to work. How do you find that balance? How do you find that sweet spot where you can give local people locals the jobs that they deserve, and then also giving the foreign workers, what they are brought in here for?
Hmm. I think we need to identify why is it that employers want to hire foreign workers. And if the reason they want to hire foreign workers is because they have something that our local workers don't have, then we need to address that difference.
Common argument is cheap labor.
Anecdotal, okay, cheap labor, but in Fiji we have the national minimum wage, which applies to everybody. There's a $5 national minimum wage in across sectors, for instance, in building sectors. Over and above the national minimum wage, you have sectoral wages. For instance, in construction, you have wages for people that lay bricks and people that do other kinds of things. There are minimum wages established for all those kinds of things. So those things are in place. So is it wages or is it attitude to work? If it is attitude to work, then the question is how do we address that? And that's going to be. I think a lot of the thing is attitude, but my thinking is not based on any research. It's just what I think. Attitude towards work.
On discipline, you also have the current debate on corporal punishment and the reintroduction of it. If let's say someone were to ask you, Mr. Usamate, do you think that corporal punishment should be reinstated? Would you say yes? Would you say no?
No, I'm not a fan of corporal punishment. I still have the scars on my leg of being. People said they gave me corporal punishment because I don't think it helps to that degree. I think there's other better ways of getting people to do what they need to be able to do rather than just whacking them. Some people say talk about corporal punishment, but it's just being done out of anger, and it's not really to discipline and improve people. A lot of it was done out of anger. I mean, I'm a former school teacher. I was a school teacher for 2 years, and I remember at that time the school that I was teaching at, the principal was a lady when there had to be a corporal punishment, and so I was one of the male teachers. I was the one that was asked to do it. So I did it sometimes, but I was never really confident that was one of the reasons why children got better or not better. Sometimes the people that you whacked, they improved, sometimes they didn't, for all kinds of reasons. And for me personally, I still have scars on my legs and other places from punishment. I don't really think that punishment molded me to what I later became. I think it was more the teachings, what we heard at home, the religion, the prayers of our parents, and all of those community influences that shaped me to become what I became rather than just a fear of the stick, which a lot of people say. Now, I have 5 daughters. I never hit them, but I just don't believe it. I don't believe in that corporal punishment coming back.
And then some people have sort of a more, I guess, nuanced approach. They would say that, you know, I'm allowed to discipline my kids, but I don't want someone else to lay a hand on them. Uh, and And then you have the issue of physical abuse as well. I guess that's a long topic that we can probably discuss some other day. Um,
Mm.
y- you know, I always ask my guests this during the end of the session, and so I wanted to ask you, Mr. Usamate. Let's say everything that you have done till this point, your time as a teacher, your time in government, your time in opposition, every public appearance that you have had, every article that you have written, every thing that you have said till this point, this very point that we are talking, if all of that was erased, what is one message that you would leave for anyone that were to listen to you?
I think the piece of advice that I would leave will be that no one person or no one group can expect to build a better future just by themselves or by their particular group. We need ways to always be able to work with other groups and to have them want to be involved in that work of developing our country or our community. Not to have a situation where we say, you guys are out, it's just us. I think that for me is the most important thing. And I think that's one of the dangers that we have in this country, that we're getting this grouping of people into little boxes where one group is saying, you guys are not important, we're important, and what we say matters. If we do realize that all of us matter, then we will find ways to tap into the strength of each and be able to give and take and compromise so that we can use of all that we have for the fulfillment or for the better development of our country. I think for me that is fundamental because I'm quite worried that I see what happens in our country at the moment sometimes, that seems to be lost, that we are sort of trying to diminish the contribution and the role of some people that are not like us. We need to be able to, I mean, that, what's that thing that the Public Employees Union used to say? United we stand. That statement is really, really true. United we stand. We have to find a way that we can unite, make use of each other's strengths and contributions, so that we can build a better nation for those that live today and those that will follow. And then on top of that, the institutions that we have in this country, we have to keep them strong. I think one of the problems that we see now, I feel that the institutions like the civil service, they have become really diluted over the years. There's a lot of funny things in how people are appointed, how they operate. And now you see all of these things happen in this case about how people are appointed and all that. When you tinker with the institutions, if you have strong institutions, you get good results. If you tinker with the institutions, judiciary, civil service, parliament, all of these different bodies, if you start playing around with them and they become weak, the impact will be generational. I think if there are two things that I'll talk about, will be those things. Institutions, recognizing that we all need each other and that we all need everybody to feel that they belong and that they have something to contribute and appreciate that contribution. I think when we are able to do that, that will be for the better of this country.
Mr. Usamate, it's been a pleasure to have you on the Philotical Podcast.
Thank you, man.